Welcome, everybody. My name is Grasso, and this is going to be an introduction to web development. This is going to be targeted to be much more of an introduction to someone who probably doesn't have as much technical skill. So someone might not be very familiar with HTML or coding in general. Just to kind of get an idea of, how do you kind of get started and how do you keep going from there. And the goal here is also going to be a little bit more interactive, mostly because I could just talk on slides, but I would much rather talk to everybody else. So cool. Well, let's get started. Well, what is web development? According to Wikipedia, which I got from Wikipedia, is basically the whole encompassing act of building a website, a web application, something on the web that is also meant to be client-facing. So this can be building a website. It can also include designing the website. It can be building something just for the company, like we have for Jostle, or it could be something building for the entire world, like YouTube. All of that's going to be falling under web development. And as you can guess, it's probably been around for a while. Probably, I guess it went mainstream a little bit before I was born. We'll let everybody pick what that means on their own. So moving from there, let's talk about the main pieces of web development for those who want to get started. So web development has kind of three main tools, we'll say tools, that people who want to get started will use. The first one being what's something called HTML, or Hypertext Markup Language. Basically, it's the main set of instructions used to tell a browser how to display information to the user. Back in the early days, as I'm going to reference Kevin's talk a lot, things were very, very simple. You might have a page just like we see this little snippet right here, where it just contains a little bit of information and is very, very functional. That's basically all it did. Obviously, as time moved forward, we want things to be a little fancier, we want things to be a little nicer and pleasing to the eye. So we started getting more creative with other major pieces. The next one being CSS, or cascading style sheets. This is meant, obviously, more to modify the looks, taking existing content and modifying it to be more pleasing, more readable, more usable, and just, I guess, overall better. Kevin has an excellent presentation they gave a week or two ago. I'd highly recommend to go see if you want to learn more about that. And the last major tool that we'll be talking about will be JavaScript, which is basically the ability to implement custom logic, custom code into your web, for your web development. So this can be like building just a little feature on your website, maybe something that changes an image, hint, or maybe something that will actually let you submit a form so you can have a blog, or you can go to something much bigger and do an actual website like YouTube where you're building a whole application out of just the JavaScript. But those are going to be the three main tools we're going to talk about this time. So cool. So we have HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. Well, now that we know we have them, what are you supposed to be doing with that stuff? Well, to get started with web development for the first time, you really don't need much. Obviously, we know we need a browser, and I'm sure everybody has a browser. But the other big thing you're going to need is just basically a text editor. And that's really it. In my case, I'm going to be using Sublime Text, something free, easy for everyone to download. And we're going to just follow that along. And I'm just going to use my native Chrome browser. So cool. So we got that. So if you have those two things, well, how do you get started? Well, I would argue let's go actually have some fun with that. So I'm going to get out of here, and we're going to go over. So to get started, I have this little web page. Currently, it's absolutely blank. It has nothing on it, and so far I called it just simple.html. We're going to talk about just the HTML for now, and then we're going to get to something a little more complicated, a little more fun as we move along. In this case, I just took my browser, and I said, I know where my file lives on my computer. And here's the path, and I want to be able to open it. And your browsers actually support doing that just fine. You just go to your browser, you type in file, colon, // and then you just paste in, oops, I copied it a little too much, get rid of that, paste in the path, you hit enter, and your browser will just open it. In this case, since it's HTML, the browser knows how to read HTML, and will attempt to render what's there. So let's look and see what we can do with an HTML file. So can everybody see this now? I'm going to assume you can see some code. Um, so cool. Here is a real basic HTML file, and it does absolutely nothing. So let's add something to it. So I want to give this a title. For those who know me, you know I like BMWs. So let's talk about my BMWs. So I'm going to give a title of this page called My BMWs. Cool. I'm just going to hit save right there. Going to go back to the web page, hit refresh, and oh my goodness, we just changed the title of this page through something very simple on the HTML page. Now let's talk a little bit more about that. In particular, the stuff in here. This HTML page is kind of an XML style format. And what that means is everything is in a little bit of a tag. We have this HTML tag. I'm going to make this a little prettier to read. We have this head tag inside of him. We don't need to worry about him yet. I have this title tag, which is I just put some text inside the title tag, and that adjusts the title of the web page. And I have this body tag, and this is actually what we're going to want to start putting content inside. And these tags kind of are the first level of control we're going to use to start figuring out what we want to display. So let's add some content. In my case, I want to just add some text of, Peter's BMW collection. Cool. And if I type that, what do we think we're going to see? We're going to see some text. Awesome. Well, cool. But text isn't everything I want. I want to see a little bit more. So, okay, how about we just start? Let's assume. Well, what do you have in a collection? You can have a bunch of cars. So let's list them out. Cool. So how are you going to list it out? You're going to start with what's called an unordered list, or a UL. So this special tag basically says, I want to create an unordered list, or just a list, and I want to render it on the page. And the browser understands when he sees this tag, I'm going to render everything inside of it in a simple list. So now I'm going to say I want to have an item, and I'm going to go with my first BMW. I'm just going to start with oldest to newest. It's going to be my 1994 F-150. And for anyone who says that isn't a BMW, if you've ever seen Chuck drive it, you'll swear it's a BMW. When he drives it, I can't keep up with him. Cool. And then we're going to go to the next one, which will be, 1995 540i. And we're going to close that little tag. I'm just going to copy this because I have another one. Don't ask why. The next one will be a 2005 330i. And the last one will be a 2007 Z4. Cool. So I add a little bit more content. And hey, we got a list. And that didn't take any time. And now we've got a little bit more information to the page. But I kind of want to change the way this looks just a little bit. So HTML gives you some tools for doing.
You have 5 BMWs?
Yes, including the Ford F-150. It's absolutely 5 BMWs.
Okay. We're paying Peter too much.
We didn't talk about how cheap these cars were. That's a different topic. We can go. That can be its own happy hour. Cool. So personally, I like BMW, so I want the BMW to stand out. And I can do that in HTML very easily by wrapping in what's called a strong tag. And in this case, what the browser is going to see is, oh, I see this. I know this means I want to make this extra emphasized. So I'm going to take this text inside that tag and make it a little bit more prominent. In this case, it's basically bolding it. Cool. Well, I want to be a little fancier with this. I want to make these all links because just because I've talked about them, the person on the page might be like, well, I don't know what that is. So I want to help them get there. So I think I want to do this with a link. Cool. So we'll do that so we'll set up a link. So you can do that with what's called an A tag. And we're just going to do that. Now, just because we did that, nothing's happened. The reason is tags can be a little bit more complicated than just some text. for example, if you have a link, you can have some text on the link, but that doesn't mean the browser will know exactly where the text will want to go when you click on it. So we have to go specify that. And we're going to specify that using a tool called attributes. So in this case, we're going to hit the space right after the first opening of the tag, and we're going to go start specifying these attribute values. In an A tag, he has an attribute called href or href that says, hey, this is where this link is going to go. Cool. Now, where do I want this to go? I want this to go to probably just a Google search of what it is. So I'm going to say https://www.google.com/search $Q equals 1994 F150. Now, we're going to talk about links real quick, but basically this is just a link. If I did an F150 search, that would come up. This would become the URL. Google keeps it kind of simple to know, so I just know it off the top of my head. What you can always do is just go to a page, copy that URL, and use that as your link. And if I refresh it now, this is now turned blue, just like a link on a regular web page. And if I hover over it, you can see here's the URL. The browser now knows this is supposed to go somewhere if I click on it. And if I open it in a new tab, hey, we got a Google search on the 1994 Ford F-150 BMW. Awesome. Cool. So that's a link, but what if I want to do a little bit more? Like, I want to add a little more flair on my name because I have great taste. My name has to be in italics, right? Oops, no one wants to see that. So we're going to do that with what's called the EM tag. And we're going to see the browser all of a sudden treat that text differently. And there's going to be tags everywhere to do all sorts of little things. And when you start reading tutorials on how to do web development, you can start learning what they mean. But in this case, we've got a really, really, really simple web page. Now, I want to add an image. Because so far I said I've had BMWs, I listed what I have, but I want to show a picture of one. Well, conveniently, I got some pictures in this folder. So let's go include some. Let's include one of them. So we're going to do that with what's called an image tag. And that's just going to be IMG. And now, unlike other tags where all of these have two tags that encapsulate text, images tags are special. Because an image doesn't actually have any text that goes inside of it, it doesn't need to close. It just needs an attribute that says, what image do I want to load? Now, unlike this href, where we're just going to go to URL, my image is going to be right here. I don't need a full URL to get to it. So browsers know when you put in a source that is going to be a path that's related to where you are now, you can just go figure out where that is automatically. So when I put in, we got a file here called F150. That's not good. There's our file again. I can just put in F150.jpg or JPEG, and the browser is going to see that. I'm going to go look in the same folder I'm currently in and look for a file called F150, and I'm going to go load that. Cool. So save that. We're going to refresh. Hey, there's a picture of my F150. Well, not my F-150, mine's not anywhere near that nice, but mine's also green, so that counts. So, cool, we've added a picture. In fact, we can go add pictures of all the cars. Now, to save time so we don't have to look at all of that, I'm just gonna go and steal it from this guy. Now, I want to start wrapping this text to be a little bit different. So if we see in this case, let's write a quick description about my cars. What do I want to type? So I will say, when I was 28 years old, I spent my life savings on my first car. It was great and broke all the time. Cool. Now, we're going to save this, and he's going to appear a couple lines below, and we're going to go see what he looks like. Well, we have the new images we added. One of these is really, really, really big. And in fact, they're all kind of weird sizes. That's kind of weird. We're only going to want to address that soon. The other thing is I see this new text I added, but it's on the same line as the first one, even though over here I put it on a different line. And there's actually a very good reason for that. These files can get to be absolutely massive. And the browser needs to be told very, very specifically exactly what you want to do. Because if he tries to guess, he's going to get it wrong. And if he leaves any room for ambiguity, you are going to force him to guess, and things are going to get very, very weird. So in this case, I want to tell the browser that this text is going to appear on its own line. So how do we do that? Well, obviously, there's going to be a whole tool for that. And in this case, we're going to use what's called the P tag, also known as the paragraph tag. And all we got to do is wrap it with the P tag. And we're going to go refresh it. And boom, he's put onto his own line. Now, there's also all sorts of other little tags that do similar things. For example, we can wrap these images in a div. A div is a very basic building block element that basically says, I want to wrap all of these images in a little box together. And this way, anything that happens to this guy, if I want to push this whole div down, it pushes all the images down with it. So it's kind of just like you're bunching them up with a rubber band, and now they're going to be treated as one element when you treat them at the div level. There's also other little ones. For example, we could do a span. A span is just like a div, except now it's going to be far more in line. Cool. And I believe Kevin talked about spans in particular in his last one. Also recommend going to look at that. Now I'm going to cheat real quick, and I'm going to go grab the rest of the links here, unless you want to watch me type. But let's make it go a little faster. And there, going back to our original file. Put them there. And we're going to fix the tabbing to make it easier to read. Cool. Now if we refresh this, we got links for all the cars. And as you can see, the div didn't really change anything. And there's a reason for that. All I did was tell the browser, I want to wrap all these images such that they can be treated the same, but I didn't tell it to actually do anything with that. So it didn't do anything with that. If I wanted to take the div and put in a couple breaks, which we can do with the BR, it's just going to push things down. In this case, let's make it a little more obvious and put a bunch in. I believe this is supposed to be closing. There we are. We have a little bit of a larger gap, but the div is still just kind of doing its own thing. And now we're going to start seeing examples of when we would use that, well, I guess next. So to kind of recap, we got this really, really, really basic HTML file where we took some tags, we specified a title, and we started producing some content. And it's a very, very functional site. It gives you information. But that's about it. And going back to what Kevin's presentation showed is we want to start making it a little bit fancier. And we're going to start doing that with something called CSS. So to kind of get started with that and kind of see what you can do with that, we're going to go load up a new file. So let's see. We can load up this guy. So I want to load up a new file. Let's gonna move that. There we go. And that's very simple. I'm just going to change the URL to be the new file. Awesome. So here's the pre-built guide that I made last night, ready to go, ready for us to modify it. So the first thing I think I want to do here is I want to modify as much of this web page as I can without touching any of the HTML. I think that's going to be our goal. We're not going to touch the HTML at all. So first thing I want to do is, I guess we want to pick a background color. What background color should we make this? What should be the theme of the site, of this web page? Any suggestions for that?
Yeah, light blue.
Light blue. Okay, cool. So to get started in this guy, I'm going to move this up just so I can see. Bam. We have this new tag called style. This can also be included in separate files, but in this case, we're going to keep things simple and just put it into a style. Since I want to target the entire site, we're going to start using CSS and CSS selectors as covered by Kevin. So I'm not going to spend too much time on exactly how that works, but we'll get to see it. I'm going to target the entire page, which is the body. And as you can see, it matches to this guy right here. And I want to set the background color to light blue. And we're going to save that, refresh. Bam, we got a background color. Cool. Well, that's a start. I think I want to add a little bit more padding. I don't like how close these are to the whole edge of the web page. Well, how am I going to tackle something like that? Well, I know that the body encompasses everything. And I know that Kevin talked about this thing called padding and margin. So I think I'm going to specify some padding. So I'm going to specify padding, and you can pick to do like just padding all around or just padding in the individual side. In this case, I want it all around. And I'm going to say 1 EM. I can't remember what EM stands for. Kevin, what does EM stand for?
Emphasis.
Yes.
In this particular case, I don't think it actually stands for something. It comes from typography and the M box around a element, but it refers to the font size, basically.
Yes. Cool. I'm going to use that to basically build a little bit of room around the outside. Ooh. He did do something and then he went back. That's funny. Oh, cool. Now you get to see what it's like to be a programmer. So I'm going to change up the margin and pray that works. Neat. Awesome. Well, that's not how I did it last night anyway, so that's fine. In this case, we're going to tackle that in a different way. I know that I also kind of want to make this list a little bit cleaner. As much as I like this list, I want it to look a little less like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go take and start targeting the list. And fortunately, I only have one list, so I can just target the entire type of element. And we're going to stay, ooh, what's the field off the top of my head? Well, I guess it depends what I want to do. I think I want this to be a horizontal list, just because that's the first thing that came to my mind. Totally not what I did last night as a preparation. So I guess, I believe it is list style none is the first thing I want to do. And as I cheat off my other little guy, we're going to grab this guy. And I'm going to start using the flex system to display him in a horizontal row. And we're going to talk about that right now. So list style none. First, we're going to go look at what that does. Nothing off the top. That is perfect. So I bet it does a lot of stuff with the flex. I'm not, ooh, that's not loading what I thought it would. Am I doing something funny?
Hey, Peter, your selector is UI, not UL.
That's it. Thank you, Kevin. This is why I wanted him here. This is why I explicitly asked for him to be here. Oh, hey, it is now in the middle. So we're going to talk about that now. In this case, list style none is basically removing the original. Oops, that actually, oh, that's kind of cool. Comment those out. Removes the original dots. And cool, so now I got rid of the dots. I wanted to be a horizontal list. In that case, I used Flex to do so. Flex is a property that the browsers have. And to kind of change, I guess, more or less how it's picking where to put content. And in this case, when I say flex, it's going to start doing a little bit of magic, namely to start putting things into a row. And I told it I want to also put the content towards the center along the main axis through the justify content. I can also do other fields. In this case, they all don't matter, or the defaults are perfect for me already. But there's plenty of more, and all of it has great documentation. I also said I also want to wrap this just in case they run out of room. As you can see, I have plenty of room, so I'm not going to worry about that. Cool. Now, I don't like how I can't tell where one link begins and another one ends. So I think I want to tackle that next. Now, there's a couple ways we could do that. I think I'm going to tackle that through the list items, which will be the LI. And this time I spelled it right. Yay. I deserve a little bit of coffee for that one. Cool. So there's a couple ways we can tackle that. I think my first thought is, if I remember correctly, padding is what's on the outside. And I'm probably just gonna pick some value and we'll just say 1 EM, we'll say padding dash left, 1 EM, just to keep things real clear, and padding dash right. And if I hit the refresh button, hey, they are now a little bit of space. I can now tell where one begins and where one ends. In addition, because we have the flex and we specified a wrap, if we start making this smaller and smaller and smaller, he automatically starts wrapping around to the next size. And it's going to be a really, really useful feature because I just got a whole bunch of functionality out of my site without having to modify the HTML at all. All I did is start specifying some CSS rules. Cool. Well, that's a good start right there, but now these images are starting to bother me a lot, especially this picture of the road. I mean, it's a road in front of my house. I do like it, but it's a bit much for me. So let's tackle that next. And I think I want to tackle it in very much the same way. And this will be real simple. In this case, since we had that div element and he's wrapping all of our images, I'm going to use that div to target him. Except in this case, I want to take an example of using, actually, no, we're going to not modify the HTML as I said before at all. And we're just going to target the div. And I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say display flex. And we're going to say flex dash wrap, just way we can make sure it actually goes down to the next line. Justify content, center, and that's going to get the first section going. And then let's go just see, what does that do to begin with? Well, the images are in the center, which is better, but I think I want them in a row, kind of like these links, something that's a little more manageable, especially in size. Let's go target that next. In this case, I'm going to say I want to grab a div, and then I want to grab the images inside the div, and I think I'm going to say I want to specify a max, well, height I don't really care for. I just want it to be automatically picked, but the width, I think I want to, let's see, what do I want to do? Let's just pick a width to begin with. We'll say 17%. This is just a number I'm just picking for the sake of, just to see what it does. And oh, hey, we got some images. Some of them look a little distorted. Like this one, you can kind of tell he was squeezed in a little bit. But overall, they actually look pretty good. And we get a picture of all the cars in one frame. So that's awesome. But the problem is, if I start making this thing smaller, well, the images get smaller, and that's okay. But if you make it really tiny, well, I want the images to still be a little bit bigger than that. Cool. By the way, since we're on the topic of cars, here's a picture of Ryan Blaze drifting his car on a dirt track on a mountain in West Virginia. Cool, plug done. I promised Ryan I would do that. We're gonna move forward. So I want these images to wrap, which kind of means the size, when I said 17%, that's 17% of the room they have available, which is the entire web page. And 17% is always 17%. If I make it smaller, that size just gets smaller with it. So I don't want that. So I need to do a much more hard-coded value. So I'll just say, I'm gonna say 16 EM because that's just the first thing coming to my mind. And refresh it, that looks pretty close. But now what happens when I make it smaller? Oh, cool. Now it's actually wrapping automatically. That's perfect. Now this thing is so much easier for me to kind of maintain the size of the images. And even if I make it smaller and smaller and smaller, it just adjusts automatically. Cool, we got that. Let's talk about this section now. What do I want to do with him? Well, I guess first thing I want to do is move him away from this corner. What else? I guess let's start there. So in this example, he is in what's called an H1 tag, which basically means header. So I'm going to use that to target him. Let's say H1, and I'm going to say, let's say padding. In this case, it can be anywhere all around him, and I'm just going to say 2EM, and we're going to see what that gets us. That's probably a bit much for me. We'll go with just 1, and that's a little nicer. I think I want to say padding top 1EM. Oops. I'll say padding left 2. Now I'm specifying which side I want to add padding to, and bam, cool. I think I want to do a little bit more with this. But first, let's take an advantage of seeing kind of what I just did with that padding. So so far we've done a whole bunch of little things with this web page, and it's just a lot of guess and check. But I kind of want to see a little bit more about what I'm doing. So the browser actually has a lot of tools that kind of help you get started with that. So if I go right-click on an element and hit the Inspect button, it's going to open up this little dude down here. And this is a very, very powerful tool that I use every day, because this is giving me the entire HTML page that this file has. So this content you see right here is this file. Cool. So I can do this on any site. I can see how it's laid out. In addition, I'm going to move these faces to the other side. I can also go see the styling being applied to it. So if I go and inspect that H1, oh, I see that here's that rule I added right there. And we can see the dependency, the hierarchy, as Kevin was talking in his talk, that mine was the most, mine has currently the most precedence. And I can even see where it's being defined. And if I hover over it in the text, let's move this back to the other side so I can actually see what I'm doing. If I'm hovering over him, the browser is actually also showing me the box that this thing actually encompasses on the web page. In fact, it does that for all the elements when I hover over it. So now I get a visual reference of exactly how much room this thing takes on the web page. That can be really, really powerful, especially when you start seeing a little bit of funny behavior. Like, I kind of don't get why can't I get this closer? Even though it kind of says it's a site, I can clearly see it's taking up more room, but I can't make it squish. This will help give you a lot of clues as to kind of what's going on behind the scenes. Not to mention, when I start developing a site, I could do the whole, I'm going to be in the file, and I'm going to go modify this thing and refresh the page. Or you know what? I kind of want to start messing with this background. I kind of want to do it a little faster. Well, I'm going to go click on the body tag. Oh, hey, that's where we define the black background color. I'm going to modify it right here. In this case, the browser has autocomplete, so I can just start going through them and just start picking the predefined colors and just start scrolling through until I find one I like. This is something I use all the time when I'm trying to see what I do and don't like on a web page, or if I notice something funny, or in this case in particular, oh, hey, these aren't aligned right. Do I have to do something with that? Or am I trying to look at exactly how I should specify when things should wrap? Modifying a lot of things in the browser and translating it back to code is a very common thing I do. And it's a very, very powerful tool. And one of my more favorite ones is definitely the mobile renderer, where I can get to see kind of what it's going to look like in a phone. In this case, I'll just pick my phone. And without actually having to go load it up on my phone, in this case, I couldn't even load up my phone because it's not on a web server yet. But now I have an idea of getting it ready for a phone long before I do it. Awesome. Cool. Well, that was CSS. There's still one major tool that we haven't talked about. That'll be the JavaScript. So in this case, let's go to that file that we're going to go use. So that's going to be with-js. And in this case, you'll see what I did last night for this page, where I gave the title a little bit of a background. I made these links kind of more closely line up with the images. Gave a little bit of border, added some borders. In fact, just because we're here, let's go look at the file. And this is all done through CSS. I didn't modify the HTML at all from the original one that we saw. All I do is add some CSS rules, and I'm changing a lot of the way this looks. Awesome. So for the JavaScript, I think I want to maybe do one image at a time. I want to show one image and I want to cycle through the images. How would I tackle something like that? Well, I'm going to start by adding what's called I can never find a perfect place for these faces. There we go. I'm going to start by adding what's called a script tag. Now, a script tag is another type of tag that says, I want to execute JavaScript inside here. Now, you can also have files or JavaScript files that the system will require to help you. And in fact, actually, let's do that. That's another way to add JavaScript, just like you can have CSS files, or you can specify them in line. We're going to do both real quick. I know for this demo, it's going to make it a lot easier for me to do things if I include jQuery. And I've already downloaded the jQuery file, and that's that guy right there. As you can see, he's a beautiful, very clearly difficult to understand file, but he does a whole bunch of stuff that's really cool for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a script tag, script, and I'm going to go add a source property. And just like we did with the images, I'm going to require the jQuery -3.5.1.minified.js. Now, what this is going to tell the browser to do is that when it gets to the head, it's going to see this script tag. Before he continues anything else, he's going to download and run this script tag. This is going to be really, really important if you have an application that builds and you want that JavaScript to run before any of the HTML loads, or if you have a bunch of JavaScript files. For example, you have jQuery and then you have an extra feature to add to jQuery. It's going to respect the order. So if you have 5 of these script tags in a row, it's going to execute the first one, then the second one, the third one, and the fourth one, all the way down. That's going to be a very, very powerful tool. In this case, I just gave us a library to make our lives much, much easier. And if we go down here, we can start using that. So the goal is I want to show only a single image at a time, and I want to cycle through the images. Well, I know I'm going to need to have I guess a function for this, because I'm going to use a function. This way I can constantly rerun the same code without having to basically copy and paste it a million times. I want to be able to run this forever. So I'm not going to get too deep into the syntax here because this can very quickly bubble, and we'll talk about how we can learn more about this afterwards. But I'm just going to talk as a type. So I'm going to create a function of cycle image, and he's going to equal a function who doesn't take in anything. And there we go. And I know, let's see, I think I'm going to do this just by setting all the images opacity to 0. So we're just going to see what this does now. So if I refresh this page, all the images have disappeared. And the reason for that, and they're still there, if we look in the HTML, they're just set such that the opacity makes them transparent. And if I just go that and set that to 1, oops, I did that blind. Oh, I did do that right. Or just turn that, oh yeah, he did work. We can override that, and we're going to take advantage of that for our behavior. So I know also I want this to be in the middle. So the way I can do that is if I use the position attribute and make that absolute, that's going to layer all these images to be relative of their parent, which will be this div, and basically put them in the center. And we're just going to pick one of these, set opacity to 1, and there he is. This is the second one on the list, so he should be appearing on the second column, but he's now in the middle. In fact, all the images are in the middle. And that means we don't have to worry about where they're going to be placed. So now the only thing I have to worry about is I'm going to make it a little bigger, and then I just need to pick which one I want to have transparent and which ones not to have transparent. Cool. So, and I guess I'll just make this 23 EM. I don't know, something like that. So we got the cycle image. Now using jQuery, which I'll do with that is the new variable that's getting imported from this library up top. I'm going to say I'm going to create this variable called images, and he's going to be the result of asking jQuery to get me all the images on the web page. Cool. And now I'm going to say, first thing I want to do is images dot CSS. So I'm going to modify the CSS, change the opacity to 0. This is going to hide all of them. And the reason why I'm always going to hide all of them at the beginning is so I can call this function as many times as I want, and he will automatically hide whatever image was shown and pick a new one. But now I got to go pick a new one. So, well, I guess we got to go pick a random one. So we'll start by getting a random number. And so random, oops, now I got to spell things right. Random image is going to equal math.random. So we're going to tell the browser, I want to get a random number. But the problem with this is that the random only returns a decimal number from 0 to 1. Well, I want this to be from 0 to the number of images I have. So I need to multiply this number by the number of images I have, which I can do by asking the image variable how many elements he has, also known as his length. Cool, but this also gets us a decimal number. We don't want image 4.5, we want image 4 or 5. So in this case, we're going to ask math to do a ceiling on it. Ceiling is always just going to round up, and you're going to see why and the reason we're going to do that is if we get, actually we'll just do a round. We'll do a round to keep things nice and distributed. So we can get we can get anywhere from 0 to 5. Now, we don't want an actual 5 because in the JavaScript, when you say I want to get element 1, the first element, you're not actually going to say for element 1, you're going to say element 0. And if you said you want to get element 5 for the last element, that doesn't actually exist because the list starts at number 0. So if we're us going from 0 to 5 is actually a problem. So I'm going to say JavaScript also, I want you to reset this number to be the max, the minimum of, actually we'll say, yeah, math.minimum of the number or the images dot length minus 1. The reason why we're subtracting 1 is because if we have 5 images, the length will be 5, but you can only ask for images 0 through 4. So we also have to subtract 1. So if we get a random number of 5, the minimum will say, well, I'm going to compare 5 and 4.
820987.
Oh, what was that?
The National Choir, when you think about it, is.
All right. Cool. So we're going to random image. Now, we're going to go grab that image from images.
That's what tabloid. That's what tabloids do.
Oh, we got someone who can put there.
How did we get the tabloid subject?
Are you able to put that person on mute real quick? Cool. Thank you. It's cool. So now we're just going to ask, I want to grab that random image using that number. Awesome. And now the last thing to do is I need to set that image. In this case, I'm going to tell jQuery to reload him. Because when I called the get, he's going to pull him out of jQuery, so I want to put him back into jQuery. I'm going to set that CSS attribute of opacity. I'm going to set that to 1. Cool. And that'll do it. So the first thing we do is hide the old images, or hide all images, pick a random number, go grab that image, and then show that image. So if we save this and refresh it, we don't have an image. Well, why is that? Well, this function is just a function. It's just a list of instructions. It doesn't include actually running them. It just says how to run them. So we got to actually invoke this thing. And so how do we do that? syntax. Let's see, who can catch it first? And my internet connection's unstable. Ooh, we got a twofer. Do. Well, let's see. Somewhere I got a bad syntax, and we got asking for an unexpected token on line 87. So we're going to go check out line 87. And that looks fine.
Did you type function right?
I missed an I. That's what I did.
Sorry.
So when you start declaring a function, you have to make sure you actually type the word function correctly, because that's a very special word that JavaScript's using. Now if we refresh this, cool. We still don't have an image. So I probably did something a little bit funny here. And just for the sake of time, I'm just going to go copy it out of this guy. Take that, paste them, change this to a show random image, refresh. There we go. And if we refresh it again, it's going to pick a different image every single time. Awesome. Now, I do want this to cycle, though. Well, how would I tackle that? I could do a loop, but JavaScript gets really, really funny with loops in terms of like, I want to like wait a certain amount of time, and telling the browser to execute so much stuff that it would actually take, let's just say 3 seconds to do of time would be really, really, it would lock the whole web page. That wouldn't be good for the user either. Well, fortunately, JavaScript has a little function that does exactly what we want us to do.
Because there are some populations who will need to stay at home.
We got another person.
Whenever possible.
So that's actually called set interval function. So this is something the browser has that says, I want to do this action every certain amount of time. In this case, I'm going to tell them I want them to run that function, let's say every 5 seconds. Now, set interval, the second parameter, meaning this value, it tells it how long to wait, and it's done in milliseconds. How we put in 5,000 milliseconds for 5 seconds. Cool. So we save that, and now we're just going to go refresh, and then we're going to start waiting. I'm going to see what happens. Refresh. Refresh. I did something silly there too. So just to cheat, I'm going to copy that, make sure I did that right. Refresh. And we're going to see what happens. It could also very well be that I just was putting this in the wrong file. We're not actually looking at the changes. And there we go. Cool. So every 5 seconds, he's now going to start changing the image. Well, that's a good start. It's doing that. I kind of want this to be a little cleaner. Well, one very easy way to do that is doing a little bit of an animation. If I made this fade in and out, that would be an easy way to make this all of a sudden look a little bit nicer. And that's actually pretty easy. In fact, you just do it with some CSS. So I'm going to add this transition property. And I'm going to say we're going to add a transition on the opacity, and I want to take 1 second. I think fade out. Actually, no. I think we only need 2. Save that and refresh. There we go. One little line, and all of a sudden those transitions between the images looks a lot nicer. Now, there's still a little bit jarring because the images are different sizes, because the height is calculated off the width, and the images are different aspect ratios, so it kind of can look a little weird. So normally, in an ideal world, we'll pick images that are all sized the same or size the same ratio, or we just fix the sizes appropriately and crop them out automatically. We'll do something that makes them look good, but those are all little things that we can do whenever. Now, when I was doing this, a lot of the stuff that came down to is just me basically Googling random things of, cool, well, I've never done fading images like this before, so I just went to Google, you know, how do I do interval in JavaScript so I can start running the function. Because I knew how to build a function, but I didn't know how to make it like run every 4 seconds. Or in this case, I was trying to figure out how do I want to do that. And just a lot of it came down to looking at various tutorials and kind of moving on. So if we went back to our guy right here, view, presents, there's a million places where you can start to learn more. So that was just basically a quick example where I went over some HTML, some CSS, and some JavaScript. And you kind of built this really basic web page using nothing more than a text editor and a browser. Unfortunately, because the internet wants to be good, there's all sorts of places you can go. I found a million tutorials on YouTube. In fact, I was following one last night to kind of help me prepare for today. Mozilla has a great introduction to web development that you can just go follow. W3 Schools has great JavaScript tutorials along with CSS and HTML. And if you want to start just kind of getting your general coding skills better, there's a million tutorials. I always like going to JavaBat to kind of just work on my small problem solving skills. And then the list will keep going on and on and on and on forever. The only warning I have with that is that once you start doing that, you're going to suffer the same fate I have, or at the very least my work account has, of you're going to get a lot of Wix ads. And I thought I could survive it, but man, Wix wants me now. And they're not letting up. So that's the only problem of trying to start this process. But aside from that, I think it's something anyone can do in your spare time and just kind of move on with it. Awesome. And that's about it. I'm going to take these slides. I'm going to send them over to Anne so we can get them shared out. Along with all that code, I'm going to put that into a little zip file, and it'll also be shareable just so everyone can see it. So yeah, we'll have that available. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter.
Thanks, Peter. That was awesome.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.
Peter.
Thank you, Peter.